Tēnā tātou katoa. No mai, haere mai, no mai hoki mai, tēnei hui. To open us up before we get underway with our tuamaka strategy, I'd just like to invite you to open us up.
Tēnā tātou, ko tai mai ki tēnei huinga o tātou tūtahi ai parehau ka nui te mihi ki a koe, I roto I te pahi apuria I kia e koe, Glen Hawkins, Chiha, haere mai, haere mai. Nō reira, ko tā te tono te manukura ki au, manukura has asked that I open karakia, so me hihiri nei. Pau hihiri, pau rarama, pau te whakaaro, pau o te tangata, pau o te aroha. Ko te pau e here nei a tātou, mauri ora ki a tātou, whano, hara mai te toki, haumi e tutawa mai I runga, tutawa mai I raro. Tutawa mai I roto, tutawa mai I wamo. Kia tau wai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa. Whano, hara mai te toki. Haumi e hui
Welcome everyone, and thank you for warmly welcoming our friends from GHA. And we may have Councillor Wing and join online. We'll wait to see if they turn up. But I'm just going to hand straight over to you, Paul. So you do have this in your Stella. Oh, sorry, in the email anyway. Maybe the Stella. Then we'll hand over to Paul.
Mātarai te rohi nei, tēnā koutou, morena. Aratuna ngani ingi nei te huarahi whakaparama tātou, o tira ki a koe hoki e parehau GHA. So I just want to acknowledge Kingi for opening us this morning, worship, as well as Parehau Richards from Glen Hawkins. I know that many of you sat in the health check workshop presentation that we did probably about 3 to 4 months ago, and Parehau and Kirsten Ray presented their feedback. So it was important today that we had representation from Glen Hawkins, who pulled this work together for us, and we're integral in that. So I want to acknowledge that. And certainly, if there are questions that I can't answer or the Moringi can't support, we'll defer to any nuanced detail of the strategy, and that's the reason why it's in the house today. So, look, I thought I'd get into it pretty quickly. We've got an hour or so, and I don't assume that we will need all of that. And I think the real benefit today will be rich conversation as we work through the slides. There's only about 6 slides. I think some of them are probably more poignant than others. So the intention is not to put the slide up and speak to it. The intention is to put the slide up. I'll take it that you have had a chance to look at tuamaka. You've seen the health check report, seen the health check presentation. And as we move through those slides, if there's particular questions of clarity, that's where the richness of today's conversation will go. And then there's a last slide with some questions for your consideration. That's a good way to progress through this morning's session. Where do we start? I thought whether it's timely or not, I was scrolling through some kōrero this morning, and I noticed one from a fellow colleague over in Tauranga. He actually does work for us too, Carlo Ellis, and he put up a post, and I just thought it was really poignant. So I might just kick us off there. There are real benefits to be had when it comes to working with our communities. In a particular case here, our hapuri iwi and our hapuri Māori. Some of us want fiscal outcomes, and one example of that is there's nothing much more expensive than a divorce. And the example of relationships for us is the cost of that we incur with delays and opposition from the community, not just Māori, but opposition from the community. Some want environmental outcomes, and then we can look at what are the ramifications of when we try to reverse. And I know that there's councils around the country that are where some big environmental challenges that lay on their doorstep, either to the future or have historically had to address those. So, we ultimately, and I'm referring to the kōrero that I hear amongst yourselves all the time, you want something sustainable for your community. You want safe, harmonious, connected communities. And today's tuamaka is addition to that. It's not replacing anything. So what we're about to present to you is something that's an addition to. We're not suggesting that we need to replace anything or drop anything. It's addition to. I've sat in the chamber for 2 years. When I arrived, it was, great relationships amongst yourselves with pockets of the community, with iwi, and that's how highlighted in our health check that came through, that there were strong individual relationships, but there's also some space for improvement too. And if you're going to have those, all the work that we do, if we don't have a plan, if we don't have policy, if we don't have guidelines, it becomes very reactive. And I can share with you that it's exactly the space that we find ourselves in at the moment. Reluctantly, we are very reactive when it comes to working with our hapu, our iwi, and hapuri Māori, and that's just the reality. So what's proposed to you today is to share with you the final draft of tuamaka, which is a plan. It's got guidelines, and it's got the intention of an implementation plan, which hasn't been drafted yet, but it's in the tranches of that. Ultimately will make changes to both how we do things at council. So we're looking for efficiencies, cost effectiveness, risk mitigations. How do we deliver on those, our legislative responsibilities? But actually, how do we do the best by our communities? And I mean communities, because there's lots of different communities in our district. So today is about sharing a plan, so that one, staff can lean on it. I mean staff, I'm talking about governance as well. We've got a document here that you can go back and refer to, because we didn't have that. We had pockets of information, but it wasn't coordinated and corralled. It talks about principles and guidelines on how we can do things, because we didn't have that in a central place that can stimulate thinking and lean back on in challenging moments. Well, what is our plan? What is the direction we're going to? So that is the purpose of tuamaka. Tuamaka is about us having a plan to take us forward. So if you may, I'll get into what our plan is for today's workshop. Look, I'm going to quickly cover over our journey to date. So we've had a couple of workshops. You'll be privy to the health check, what we heard from Glenn Hawkins, and Pareho's here if you've got any questions, and we can answer those too. I just want to say it wasn't just the health check. And can I say also that my predecessors used to do health checks too. I know Gina Rangi would do a survey every year, and I'm not sure if she brought that through to elected members, but I definitely saw the artifacts from those questions that were coming through to inform. So the health check process that we undertook wasn't a one-off. It was on top of a regular cycle of questions to iwi and hapu in the district. We'll talk quickly about what the tuamaka framework is, and I do want to acknowledge that it would be really good, perhaps, Kingi, if at that time we might get you to talk about what the whakaaro of tuamaka. I'm keen to share with you what the return of investment is, outcomes, and what does success look like, so we can actually, hey, what are we trying to achieve? And then there's one last slide about some recommendations, suggestions about these. Please, as we go through those slides, just 5 questions, because I think that'll be the richness of today's conversation. So, look, I'm not going to read it out. We heard loud and clear from our hapu, our iwi, and our hapuri Māori about where things were good and where things can be improved. So, and that was shared with you at the last workshop. So, and this is about us improving and about us getting better. Please just stop me as I go through these slides, because if there's no questions, I'm just going to bounce on to the next one. The framework, and this is where I might hand over to Kingi. Would you like to explain tuamaka?
So you can face towards pare, tuatahi, hei whai hari o kupu, through you. Madam Mayor, tuamaka is an old word, at least 300 words, and it comes from a legacy, we call an haki, from an ancestor, Te Rangi Iwaho, was a tupuna of the Manukura, myself, and of course Ken Raureti, who just recently passed away. Te Rangi Iwaho, Ngāti Whakaue, is made up of 6. The Ngāti Whakaue that we know today is made up of 6 major rangatira. And Te Rangi Iwaho is one of those rangatira. And when he passed away, he said to his people, he gave them an ohaki, a legacy, which goes, whiria te kaha, tua maka tia, ki te motu honua, purutia rotorua. So whiri are like little strands. And when they're on their own, they break. But when you combine them and you strand them together, they are strong. So what that means is, whiria te kaha, bind together your strengths. That's what kaha is. Bind together your strengths. Tua makatia is a word which means to tighten or to combine even further at a minute level. That's what tua maka means. So the word tua maka here means to bind together even stronger. And if you notice, the word tuamaka is actually, doesn't have te tuamaka, it has tuamaka, because tuamaka is a verb, which means it's an active, ongoing kaupapa. Whiria te kaha, combine your strength. Tuamaka tia, make it even stronger. Ki te motu, motu honua, if it breaks, bind it back together again. Purutia rotorua, and whatever you do, hold on to rotorua. And that's what that means. And so when we look at tuamaka, is a verb, is an active way of bringing us together in using our strengths, using what brings us together. Kuia te tāhuatanga, that is the beauty of the kapu, tuamaka. It's a word from here. It reflects here as well.
You let me know if you want to go through the other 4 slides, if you're happy just to go to the end. Because actually, that's the when Kingi came up with that, it was just like, there was so many link pins to the aspirations that we hear from you all the time. Whether you, whatever subject you're on, there's lots of common language that Kingi just spoke to that I hear from all of you all the time when your voices are loud inside the chamber. So we will go through the other 4 slides, but if you can steer me, you go, nah, probably just go to the last slide and let's have that conversation. But so the tuamaka framework, there's some examples there. We needed a clear operating framework, something that we can lean on. Staff governance, we need something we can hinge ourselves back to when we're having conversations of strategy, policy influence, SOPs, even when there might be tough conversations, and I know many of you have been in some tough conversations over the last few years, but also conversations of opportunity. And that's the trend, that's the trajectory that we want to get to. We want to minimize conversations where there's tension or disagreement or perspectives, and that's normal. But we actually want to unblock more conversations where we're stepping forward together, where we can go together to Wellington to seek funding that eases the burden on ratepayers. If there's and we've got so many rich examples of where we work closely. I'll use the lakeweed, for example. That was a challenge that came. The Mayor, Rotorua Lakes Trust, various community groups, the clans, that's another example here when we come together in challenging moments and work collectively together. And how do we have more and less of the sticky ones? Direction on how to work with mana whenua, because there's so many different views, but we needed something that we could lean back on and say, actually, these are the standards that we want to operate by. And in the tuamaka strategy, there's principles and guidelines here that speak to that. We wanted to make sure that we actually signalled our commitment. Often we go into meetings, whether it be staff or at yourselves at the elected members, governance level, we get challenged. Is that what you really do? And we want to say that, hey, here's our signal. We are being, this is, we want to take this out and show that we have heard, and this is how we respond. One of the big areas, and I said it right at the start, we're desperate to move from being reactive to proactive. So when we're being reactive, we need to have a plan. And when we're in a reactive space, it's because we don't have a plan. And when we have a plan, and we know which way we're paddling our canoe towards, then we can bump off the noise and actually focus on what it is that we're trying to achieve. So at the moment, we find ourselves flexing and twisting because we're not anchored. And this is what tuamaka does. It provides an anchor. like all of your strategies, if you could think about whether it be your property strategy that I know many of you are looking forward to receiving. Well, this is our strategy for having stronger relationships with our community. We want to seek better outcomes, as I just described. I just want to re-emphasize, this is an internal document. So, I've already been challenged around how we'll see ourselves in it, as in from our iwi and hapu perspective. Actually, this is about getting our house in order. And in order so we can have those better conversations, so we can be better and have less reactive issues. We want to get our house in order. Our house being our chamber staff. We want to tidy up. We want to bring efficiencies. And I heard that yesterday and the day before about basics done well, efficiency, organisational efficiencies, best practice. This is what this will enable us to do. And it's not about spending money on to get better relationships. This is about the way we think. This is about how staff think, about how governance might think too. Because it ultimately changes the way, because we can lean back on this document and go, here's our guide. So that's what the Tuamaka framework is about. Any questions?
Just thank you. When I read the slides, I was like, but then now that I've had it explained more, I get it. And thank you very much, Kingi, for that explanation as well. How is the connection between all of the great kōrero feedback that you received from iwi and hapu? Then I suppose the reassurance I'm just seeking is the key issues that iwi and hapu identified. Is this the framework aligning with how we address those key issues as well as just how we do the doing better?
No, so I mean,
if you could just talk us through the connection, because that was an awesome piece of work. The health check.
How do we know we're successful? So if you look at some of these examples here, those are exactly responsive to these. And a lot of them are actually things that happen inside our building. We've got a massive work program. How we schedule and package that up, work program. So here's a really good example. We, at present, when we get a project, and we say, yep, we've got to go and speak to our community as well as specific engagement, we're not designed to package that up in a manageable way that they can digest timely. So we drown them. And a great example at the moment is where, you've got some massive challenges in front of you that you're dealing with. You've got your LTP work at the moment, you've got Head Start, you've got local water done well, you've got all these reforms happening. And we are seeking input from our community as well as our iwi hapu and hapuri Māori. So their ability to digest our workload, we're a full-time workforce, and you're elected officials. They're volunteers, or they're not designed to set up to receive that. So what we're looking for is, to bring it back to your question, Te Matakura, there is opportunity for us to, the way that we business plan and our teams operate, and we package it up so that we go to them in a timely fashion. We're speaking to them on the right topics. We understand them more, so we know actually this topic we don't need to speak to them on because they've told us. So that's the efficiency. We're just not set up to do that. So there are initiatives that we would propose to do over the next few years, how we would change that. And we've got examples at other councils where they do it better than us. So, hey, what is it that we can do over here? So the internal cost is actually, how do we business plan? How do we shape up our internal operational connection amongst the work streams so that we go to them once every 3 months or whatever timely works for them. So there's some actual operational disciplines and systems that we can do. Here's a good one for yourselves. How many of you have conversations regularly with iwi hapu, hapuri Māori and community? What if we had a heat map or a system that shows Councillor Stanford had a meeting, and then Councillor Lee went on had a meeting, so that when you have your meeting, you've actually got my colleagues have spoken to us, I need to do that. that's about efficiencies. Otherwise, you go into a meeting and you lose 2 hours of your precious time on something that you've already covered. So there are some efficiencies and best practices that other councils do way better. It is a challenge here, and it's a good challenge. It's a good challenge that we just happen to have the largest footprint. No other council has got. Whakatani's got 8. Tauranga, Sam, correct me, 3, 5.
Very simple compared to
Poriki's got maybe 3. Apanui and Whakatohia, you've got 35. So we're having lots of conversations, and that's just our landscape, and it's a good landscape. But it's about how do we bring initiatives, operational initiatives, through the organisation so that it makes life easier for Stavros and his team. It makes it easier for regulatory, so that we're not wasting time, and there's better efficiencies when we're having the right conversations with the right people. Because one of those things in the health check was about mandate and us being clear. And this is what Tuamaka does. It guides staff to say, we need to check mandate. So does that make sense?
Thank you. So connecting what we see here, what we read through the health check to this, the framework, then my other question is also how do we then connect from a council and a governance perspective? We're looking through our outcomes at the moment. Actually, councillors will set up a workshop or another corridor just to finalise that so that we can lock that in. But one of the parts that has come from there, and also what we had prioritised before, is we sort of have like 3 priorities, right? But then underlying all of that, or overarching, whatever you want, was like authentic engagement with community, but in particular the iwi, hapu, treaty obligations. But then how do we, so there's a desire from the council to also find out how we, as a direction from governance, signal, identify that this is important and it needs to be across the whole organisation. How do we also link that direction from this council to the organisation? So you've sort of got, sorry, I'll try to explain. You've got iwi, hapu, whomever on the ground that's saying, actually, you're doing a terrible job, and sometimes it costs us lots of money. But you've also at the same time got a council saying, but we really want to do better. How do we? So, great framework that's been developed operationally. How do we also connect the goal, the aspirations, the outcome from a council perspective as well into this, so that this framework, while you're saying it's an internal document, how do we also have, I suppose, accountability to it, to councillors to say, this is the ongoing health check, this is how we know it's successful, but this is how council can have confidence that when we do have major changes to waters or whatever, we're not in a situation where they, where they come and they are very upset at us as a council, but we go, hey, but we set this direction early on, and this was unfortunately a bit of a surprise to us that it wasn't going well.
Sorry, I'm still trying to comprehend a little bit what you're saying, but I think what you're getting to is how do you get the best advice and the best. So if we're set up operationally really well, what comes to you would be great advice and actually a really good understanding of the landscape out there. So what we're saying is if we can get internally, we can get ourselves right, we have capability right throughout the organisation, and that's what this is going to do. And then also when you want to make decisions, you have all the right advice. So currently, like super operational, but for me, I go through all the reports and I look at tangata whenua impact statements. So you are making really good decisions. However, I'm the only person that does that. So this sort of says, well, I can do training staff and bring it up to the level. So when you get your papers, you're making the right decision. Or when you seek advice in a workshop, you go out and then get that information. And it doesn't just have to be me. It could be Catherine, it could be it will be Stavros, so it will be right across the organisation rather than it just being us constantly being pulled in one way. We are building that capability right throughout the organisation. If that's helpful.
Totally answer the question. Thank you.
It's in a slightly different way. So it's council's job as the governance body to set the strategic direction of council and the priorities for as elected members for the community, which then comes through the outcomes and then what's set in the long-term plan. And it's also how that then flows through to management that needs to deliver that alignment. So it's there obviously needs to be at certain stages a healthy tension, but also there needs to be alignment with the direction. So it's how we have those two discussions so that we are actually all on the same team when we're trying to bring proposals and projects to the community. We see that working.
When this was drafted, so when I arrived, I knew that we had local government legislation that says you will do. We've got a rich community and rich history. And then underpinning that is you had a local, in your LTP, you had a statement about mana whenua aspirations. The first thing I did when I got here was, what's our plan to deliver on that? And for whatever reason, there wasn't a plan. And that's what led me down to go, do we have a plan operationally? There wasn't a plan. There were iterations. I want to acknowledge those performing and the team. There had been attempts made and there were strategies drafted, but I'm not sure that they had flowed to yourselves. So they might have stayed at operational level. Tuamaka has got such longevity in it that, and we can certainly take through, if there's a language change or a direction setting change in your current LTP aspirations that you're building through at the moment, this is the plan that we'll deliver on. It's not bespoke to just hit that. It has got longevity across delivering on commitments, recognising the community, and it's got space in there for you to bring through your aspirations. So if you do have a goal or an outcome in your LTP around, I'll just use the last LTP, so, mana whenua aspirations, and this is the plan that underpins and guides how we do that. It doesn't go specifically how you're going to do that particular outcome. There's space in there for us to have that conversation with you to set that direction. But to inform that conversation, you might refer to Tuamaka as your guiding principle document to say, well, before we have this conversation, what is the context we need to consider? What are the things? What's best practice happening in Waikato or other communities that might be doing something good? I'm not saying that there's other districts that are doing good. I think we're really good here. I really do. But there's space for improvement. And there's space to be more efficient. I think that's one of our biggest ones is operationally efficient, so that it actually ultimately, as Michelle has alluded to, some organisational efficiencies. How do we make it easier for my GMs and their work streams? How do we make it easy for you to make informed decisions and the best decision you can make with rich context that's current? It's current. So absolutely, it flows through to a plan to build on your LTP. Does that happen?
Can I just add, at the last LTP workshop that we had some.
I'm thinking about that. I was just using it of alignment, not about the exact principles.
Yeah, well, since you brought it up, at the last LTP workshop that we had, we discussed in length and detail, and I did also provide, on behalf of our ward, a framework that would support exactly what you're talking about. And I think it is around the alignment to our priorities and to our deliverables. That's why it was our position, and I have provided it to elected members who are in attendance at the workshop as well, around the iwi partnerships and I think treaty obligations was the wording that we used, should be a standalone priority with deliverables so that we can actually strategically keep accountability across the board with some of those things. And so, because that's something we've brought up at the last two workshops that we have, and it's, I suppose, ensuring, and I welcome that next workshop as well, because that's how do we incorporate some of these key feedback, because then we have questions like this which aren't in alignment with feedback that we're providing through these workshops. So I just want to ensure that, I suppose, the perspectives of councillors are being brought into those into those conversations, because we wouldn't be asking these questions if we had, because there's clear alignment there with the outcomes that have been proposed. So yeah, that's my perspective on the question that you've asked.
chip in here, if I may. I think what you proposed and what I get a sense of is that it's a silo piece of work. What I get what we're trying to achieve here is something that underpins the whole lot, not just that bit.
So whether
I'm
it's
not.
the community or environmental infrastructure, right?
It's all of it. So, you know, what you put forward, I think we probably would gain the outcome. You know, we're just articulating it in a slightly different way. And I didn't really respond to your proposal at the time because it came as a surprise. It took me a while. I'm not a guy that gets it like that, you know. Andrew Morais might, but I don't. I needed to take some time to digest it. But so I think we want the same outcomes. It's just how do we articulate it? And I would suggest that it wants to go across the whole work stream, not just you've shown it as
I think the underpinning conversation difficulty that we have with the underpinning conversation is that it's too wishy-washy and we don't have deliverables to keep it accountable. And I think actually with the way that we work, the way that we inherently work, actually it is an integral part of everything that we do. But the proposed structure is to have actually a very clear outline, defined deliverables against a prioritised outcome that we can actually hold accountability to. If it's underpinning, it's too wishy-washy and up in the air, that actually what does good look like? What does successful look like? It could look like anything. And so this is what this, I suppose for us is the alignment between that and that. And also in the proposed one that we've put forward with communications and engagement with our hapori, iwi, our hapu, our whānau are a part of that as well. So if they're an outcome and they're included as part of our hapori, it's a double whammy. Like I don't think that putting them as the underpinning and arguing that as a superior way to say actually the outcomes, because in all of the conversations that we continue to have, we first start with what are our three priorities, and not one of those priorities is the iwi, and then afterwards it's like, okay, there's these other two underpinning factors. And so it's the way that we've proposed the structure or proposed the LTP outcomes is to have a fourth priority of iwi. If we're serious about it, if we're serious about things like te tuamaka, it needs to be a priority. It has to be. And so I think the fourth priority that we're proposing, it proposes those clear deliverables. That's what's lacking with the underpinning, is clear deliverables that we can keep our staff and management accountable to. That's what the underpinning conversation lacks. Underpinning it with our hapori does not exclude iwi or hapu from those conversations. It does not also extinguish any obligations that we have to engage with iwi under various frameworks that we have, but it does make it very clear our expectations, and I don't think that the underpinning conversation makes it clear enough to management. It provides a clear enough direction about what are our expectations and what are the deliverables we're expecting from that. So that's the way that we've proposed it that way, because I keep hearing we've got three priorities, and then if we remember later on down the track, there's two underpinning things that come across. If that's the way that the focus of conversation is, then we have to align. We have to align with what we're talking about. So I honestly don't buy the underpinning thing. It's a given that we have to engage with iwi across our entire body of work. It's a given. And so how do we ensure that it's integrated properly into outcomes is what I'm more interested in, because I'm interested in keeping our staff accountable to that.
Let's ask some questions to see how the tuamaka, and we do have Dr. Pareho here as well. Let's ask some questions to see from those who have done this work for us and for others, how we can, because even though we went on a bit of a tangent on outcomes, but it's quite relevant in terms of how, and to be honest, I just want to sort that out. But it's quite relevant on how this could potentially help us and how because that was sort of my question is, how do we connect what the council wants, which we will confirm our outcomes eventually, to what the tuamaka framework and how we hold internally operations accountable as well. But can I say, what I'm hearing is I'm hearing that it's really important what I'm hearing from those who are saying underpinning this, but it's important in all of those. So I think it's just how we ensure that that's communicated and locked in a outcome policy perspective with key deliverables. So what I am liking is I'm hearing, but we want to make sure it happens. And so I think we're all on the same page there. But can I, and we're open for any questions, discussions. This is a workshop, totally but if you just, I don't know, I am quite interested, either Pareho, Paul, or Michelle, I'm quite interested in, this is work that's been done for our council, but there are many organisations that grapple with this, that serve the community in one way or another, whether that's public service government agencies, some of our big organisations, on how you can have a framework, priorities, but at the end of the day, who are you trying to help? And as a council, we try to help a whole community. This framework's particularly how can we assist with really helping Māori engagement. How do we, based on other large organisations that have also tried to do something similar to this, how do we achieve what we're talking about and concerned about right now? But would we actually see those, what's mentioned there, mutually beneficial outcomes? Will we actually see a change? Will we see an improvement? And how do you think this framework for us will be able to deliver based on experience or practice elsewhere?
Great question. I'm going to get Rob to bring up a slide that's in the actual tuamaka. So I think it's in, I think it might be page 8 of the tuamaka strategy. And I just need to flag it's not set as an example of. So you have a strategy or tuamaka, that's your underpinning document, and it talks to the context, it talks to the landscape, and it talks to ideas and principles, which feed into the conversation that you might have over the next few weeks regarding your LTP. You have an outcome, you have principles and deliverables that you will hold perhaps yourselves to account on, that you want to deliver, and the direction setting that you'll pass on to management. What I want to answer your question, Itamanakura, one of the things that we'll be seeking from you today is the implementation plan. And we have got a proposal, which is in the second to last slide, that speaks to what we're going to do over the next 12 months. There's a couple of parts to when you drop a strategy like this, and they used to be called Māori outcome strategies. That's the old iteration of the Māori responsiveness plan. Those are the old iterations that you would have seen in central government and Auckland Council and others. Whakatane Council did it. I'm not sure what Tauranga did, but here is where the rubber hits the road. And I just want to say this is what Pareho and Kirsten Ray came up with. This is what they know is best practice out in other districts, what's working in other councils and central government. And you can see here, there's a whole bunch of initiatives that align to the pressures and the areas that were identified as concern. So you've got those blue boxes at the top are responses to the areas of improvement in the health check. And here's the initiatives at a systematic and organisational change that you can consider. So we've got a proposal for you today that we're going to carry on and do if you are supportive of tuamaka coming through the organisation, and I've got a proposal for you there. We've got a year 1 implementation plan that's within current budget that we want to go away, and I understand in the CEO's KPI is committed to delivering you an engagement plan framework. That is an outcome that we will do in the next 12 months. That is how we start to bring it through, from a strategic document to rubber hitting the road. There are outcomes here that talk about governance level. What are some of the things that you might do that are specific to your space that you operate in? There are initiatives, and can I say, some of these things we're already doing. We're already inducting staff on Noho Marae and a new Te Hiwi o Rotorua is not just about Noho Marae. It's got 5 other workshops that follow on over a 6-week period. So we've taken that initiative. So some of these things we're already doing. Regular leadership, executive, at the mayor, CEO, and councillor, you're already doing that. Sorry, Michelle, 25 protocols now? Yeah, we've got 25 protocols where various members of this room sit sometimes in full. You've got the Te Aroha Partnership. You're doing it. So it's actually about us measuring it, reporting against it, and then actually saying back to our community, we're actually doing it. We heard you, but actually, because I think one of the other things that we're doing is, and it can be taken, the health check report said there's areas of improvement. We're not celebrating success. We don't have the muscle memory in this organisation of what good looks like. We're doing it. I can tell you, we used to report against it in the Te Aroha Partnerships report, but we've got to bring that to life. We've got to bring that to say, no, because there is lots of great examples that all of you have done, all of you have led in your decisions that should be celebrated, and we need to report and celebrate against it. Say, gosh, we did a good job this year. There's always areas of improvement, but how do we bring through, focus on the areas of improvement, risk mitigations, that's outlined in your risk and audit space. I know I'm writing the risks for you so you can see them. But also, how do we bring through success and actually say, man, we did a good job here? Because it's not just about staying in the negative, it's about bringing through what we did do. So here's a bunch of initiatives. I liken it to a heat map for us to consider.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. I think just to support what Paul's saying and what we heard during both processes, health check in particular, and you've seen through the reporting that Rotorua Lakes Council is doing some as well. There are some areas that are not being done well. I think I'd just like to emphasise in terms of this strategy, the words that I keep hearing and continue to hear from Hapu Iwi and Hapori through my involvement in the interviews is they all want Rotorua to flourish. They want, and they want council to think about that word partnership. What does that mean? And so the best practice model that we have turned to gives really good indication about when an organisation uses the word partner, what does that mean? And so some of the key aspirations and kōrero coming through from Hapu Iwi and Hapori were, if we're talking partnership, let's talk more, let's find opportunities to co-design and genuinely partner on papa, and not with in quite a solutions focused way too, manukura. In terms of what you're currently doing, they look forward to an opportunity to continue working away at how that continues to grow and flourish for Rotorua. Māori, non-Māori, mana whenua, manati, tiriti. So those are some of the key things that best practice international framework, we think, gives the Rotorua Lakes Council a best practice international framework to house this draft strategy that we are recommending. And as Paul has already said, there are aspects of things that you already are doing, some doing well, others where you need to think about a little bit more work over the next 10 years, has been the proposed time frame. And of course, I just want to, that first po in terms of mana and mana whenua relationships, I think that came across really strongly in all of our interviews from rōpū and people who have been intimately involved in hui and negotiations about wai, about water, about the lake, about the forest, about sewage, all of those things. Acknowledgement of mana and mana ki te mana. I just wanted to add that, mana ki te mana. So you guys are the mana of the council. the people, the operations are the mahi. And so this framework and the principles of the framework are underlying all of your work. And so that you as a group, as a rūpū who lead our district, as well as those who work in this organisation, can be on the same page in terms of those principles and values. Yeah, so those were the key things that and the key things that I continue to remember from the kōrero. And this framework and the strategy is very aligned, just to answer your earlier question, very aligned to the health check, and in terms of what you're doing well, what needs to be done better, and how iwi and Hapori would like to work with you so that Rotorua flourishes.
Paul, question if I may. Why don't we have a best practice rural engagement framework?
That's not Te Morangi's. I can't answer that.
Yes. Why don't we have a rural best practice framework?
Actually, we're really lucky. We have an awesome rural community board that is putting together some quite phenomenal strategies.
Right.
Yeah, working on an engagement.
So maybe we could model an iwi framework on that, where we've got a community board, pull it all together.
Completely different.
Quite different.
Yeah, I'll just say that in our landscape, it's a lot different to the rural community. Not saying that they're not, they absolutely are, but CNI, our partnerships with CNI are huge. So we currently, release treated water into the forest. We also use the redwoods. We are seeking, or we were potentially seeking, more land to use. So our partnerships are way different in terms of that. So this is why these sort of strategies are required, because we continuously need to use Māori land and our iwi partners' land, the community.
Okay, so
Wastewater treatment plants and joint
you're suggesting we're not in a partnership with the rural community, but we are in a partnership with iwi?
No one suggested that. What the answer you've just had is actually we do have, and we have elected members for a rural community board. We have a lakes and a rural community board. So the rural community board is actually very well represented, I believe, in Rotorua, and we have a rural ward council, which is quite unique. Is there a concern that you have?
Well, I'm trying to understand the underlying partnership idea. Where does that idea come from?
Read a partnership agreement. It's out of a partnership agreement. Have a read of that. That'll tell you.
I think another thing is that you've got to meet different groups where you can meet different groups, and so like the rural community, I'm assuming, is to a certain degree reasonably happy with the rural board and having a rural councillor and what we've got in that space. In the Māori space, it's different, and you've got to meet Māori where Māori want to be met. Like you have to meet the lakes community where the lakes community want to be met. And that is, by doing that, you have to have different strategies in different places, and different things will work for different groups.
So let's talk about
Just one. It's not we can't have a cookie cutter, one size fits all.
So where does the idea of partnership come from? Because it's a word that comes up a lot.
Treaty was signed.
And the Rotorua Township Agreement.
It's out of a partnership agreement
Okay, so
and our contracts.
you're all familiar, I presume, because I need to understand this. I don't understand this because I'm a simple guy. Section 4 of the Local Government Act talks about the Crown's responsibility under the Treaty of Waitangi. So what is our responsibility as a council in relation to Section 4?
So you've had that particular. We've gone over that one a few times at the council table.
Since I've gone over it, Hart versus Marlborough District Council has come out, so I'm interested to have
We're
an
not saying that we are a treaty partner. The Crown is a treaty partner to iwi. What we're saying, What we're saying is we need to be partners with our iwi in this district because we rely on them heavily for the land to use for our communities. That's what we're saying.
Which they have generously given, and at times council has forcibly taken. But can we connect what your question or concern with how we can do the tuamaka strategy or moving forward
Sure.
of either partnership or frameworks?
Well, I'm trying to understand the legal underpinnings of what we're doing here.
Can I shape it like this, Councillor Lee? And I know that you and I have had conversations. You've asked me lots of questions in the chamber over the last few years, and I've provided evidence of that. We've got, and this is, and your question is underpinned in this document. It is the rich context that talks through the journey of Rotorua. It describes the factual data of our population makeup. It talks about the various types of communities. It talks about, it makes reference to the settlements, and those and some of the settlements, not all of them, and some of the settlements with iwi in this town, Rotorua Lakes, has got a role to play. And I'll use Te Rotorua Lakes strategy. We are a member, that is an outcome out of the settlement. Te Marua Kaituna, we are referenced. Some of you sit on that board. Some of you, I think Councillor Brown sits on the Tarawera Awa strategy. Those are settlements negotiated between iwi in our district and the Crown. This is Rotorua Lakes. You have got a role to play in there as a representative. So underpinning all of that is, so how do we do that? How do we deliver on Section 8 of the Local Government Act that says you need to provide for participation in decision making? What is our plan to do that? What is our plan to, another outcome in that is capacity and capability building for iwi, for mana whenua or tangata whenua. What is our plan to do that? And then you have an LTP outcome, which was from the last LTP that said mana whenua aspirations. How are you going to do that? Because there's statements and there are obligations on us, as well as reflecting, actually it's a good thing to do. Noting the history of this district, noting that, as Councillor Sanford said, how do we meet them halfway? Because they're saying, we want to be, we've heard it in the health check, you hear it in the conversations, but how do we do that? And tuamaka is a plan. It's a guiding document on how do we deliver on what's right, recognising the unique communities. I mean, your representation review that you will undertake, or the council will undertake in the future, talks about unique communities and that we must provide for unique communities of interest. Yeah, so this is a plan to recognise the fact that not everyone is homogenous. There are differences, and there's a long history of town. So this is a plan to address that based on the fact that we carry risk. That's one example. Based on the fact that you have said you want this. Based on the fact that we've got efficiencies and optimization challenges that we wish to do. We've got challenges with funding. Your iwi and hapu have got connections into Wellington that not all of us have in this town. We want stability and harmonious communities. We want improved development outcomes for our people.
That's my question, Paul.
So you've asked how this document does it. What's the purpose? That is absolutely what it means.
The question is, how does Hart versus Marlborough District Council, how has that changed the thinking within your group? Because that only came out last year. It only came to my attention in the last few months.
I think actually that example was answered by Michelle.
It doesn't, that's not part of our thinking here. Our thinking is actually as a community, we have to have good relationships with our iwi partners because we actually rely heavily on them for the community.
So if I understand correctly, you want to have good relationships with local iwi, but not on the basis of it being a treaty partnership pursuant to Section 4 or any treaty of Waitangi obligations.
Treaty partner is, we are treaty partners with the Crown.
Correct.
So I'm confirming that with you. I'm saying we are saying that we are partners with iwi because we hold a lot of relationships with them that require us to be partners. We want to use the redwoods.
Right, so you want us to engage with iwi and have those relationships and even a partnership voluntarily, but not on the basis of a treaty obligation.
Councillor Lee.
You're mixing
I
up.
don't understand what the line of questioning is.
Yeah, Councillor Lee.
And clarify.
Councillor Lee, do you understand that a lot of our council assets and resource that our water is on iwi owned land, iwi managed land?
Which land are you referring to?
Do you think Michelle just said? So we've in your time also we've confirmed the joint consent for our water take with Karamutakinga, 60% of our water supply. Do you understand that that's iwi land?
Well,
Because that's the okay, good. So that's the basis of the partnership.
so if we use
So we'll just take some final. We'll wrap this discussion up really soon. Is there any final?
Councillor Brown.
You're the only one with the concern, but we want.
Do your research, Councillor Lee, rather than tweeting out.
I want to do your research. You come to being here.
That's what you need to do. Read a history book.
I mean, if here's the thing.
A lot of Robert Lees. Yes.
Council used some of Councillor Brown's land for something, a water pump station or something. I wouldn't normally expect us to go into a partnership with Greg Brown. I mean,
We need to in that partnership.
it's a voluntary partnership, not a treaty.
Requirement.
You would.
Okay, I think try to address that concern.
Relation for a partnership.
I think I maybe can help some clarity, but we'll do that afterwards. And I think just on that, I think what Michelle said is really important. What you just said, it'd be quite good to have a map and show the various Māori lands that we partner with, that we use. Massive amounts of our infrastructure are reliant on the goodwill of Māori. So if we put that upon a map, that might really
Publicly available map.
illustrate
Understand.
the extent of what iwi lands look like and how they intersect or how they join Rotorua Lakes Council infrastructure.
Really helpful because I know we've noted, and we often do in long-term plans and annual plans with a number, like a figure of the thousands of acres. Is that an action point you can?
And make sure that there's a richer conversation that highlights that and brings that to life. I'm looking at the wind.
It's a good suggestion.
So can I just pick up on a point? And it's not, because if I'm hearing correctly, the word partnership can, create some conversation. In my experience of working between Crown agencies and local government and iwi and Hapori Māori over the last 20 years, partnership is not always what they're wanting. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I prefer the word relationship because the relationship has a spectrum. And through this document, you'll see why the word treaty partner is not often mentioned, why the terminology is relationships, because actually, when you have a relationship, then you can partner on key things. And when we use the legal term and the examples used, and Stavros specifically, his projects, he's got partnerships of joint resource consent partnerships. We've got a partnership for the CNI, the largest mountain bike park in the Southern Hemisphere was. That is off the back of a high trust relationship, partnership that has its ebbs and flows. That's of a partnership. But at the same time, they don't want a partnership. That you can have another conversation with them where they just want an ally to go to Wellington for central government. They want the mayor or councillor's presence in a meeting because they see the value of the friendship being present to unlock the outcome for the community. So I just want to, it's not always partnership. Partnerships are specific to an outcome. It's a spectrum of, it's a conversation between a relationship. And I think that's the key, that this is a relationship document to help guide us to be.
I'd like to emphasise that. I mean, my example of partnering comes from a history of using that word in documentation, but what comes through strongly and why tuamaka is a relationship framework is exactly what Paul is saying. The history here, the unique history of this rohe and the history of relationships is something that Māori cherish and want to continue. into the future. These are mokopuna, grandchildren and children of elders who and ancestors who signed the Rotorua township agreement. And so, that focus on relationship framework is really important. And Kingi's explanation of why tuamaka is the word that has been chosen for the framework.
Can I just ask, earlier on, you talked about the capacity, capability that we have compared to others. 35 different groups we have to deal with, and others deal with 2 or 3. How do we know? I'm interested to know, how do we know, let's say XYZ project was mooted? How do we make sure that they're not just somebody we go to after the XYZ project has got to a point where it's almost ready to roll? Is this project process going to avoid what happened at the
There are initiatives that we would want to bring through in the changes that we would propose, and some of them would be at the CEO. So the CEO would propose step it through. Tuamaka is adopted, accepted by the council. A direction is given to the CEO and to Paul and Michelle to go away and look at initiatives, so we can put in stronger systems and processes at an operational level to mitigate those, to mitigate those risks that we might carry. We're a busy council and we've got lots of outputs. Councils are way more outcome focused than central government in my experience, and so it is a challenge to keep up, and we put a lot of load on our community. I'm talking in general here. So we would look for initiatives and changes into that example that I used previously about how do we business plan, how do we communicate. There's some efficiencies that we can do once we lock this down, if we say that this is important, because there's guiding principles about how we engage. There's a reference here to IAP2, which is best practice. So we've already brought them through actually. We've already got staff trained in IAP2, which is International Relationship Engagement Standards. So we are starting on that trajectory on how do we get better at this. So for those reasons, exactly.
So with 35 different groups, how do you keep a tab who's doing what?
Yeah, that's a challenge. It sits on it.
People change roles, people step down. Like I didn't know that Guitar Tail had changed.
Yeah.
A couple of people gone, a couple of new people come.
And that's the same for them. I don't know that sometimes staff leave, and we desperately, one of the initiatives that we want to explore is how do we put systems in behind staff, because staff leave, councillors change, staff leave, and a lot of that knowledge sits on your shoulders with your relationships. So how do we underpin relationships? So that would be an operational initiative that we would suggest do after an outcome.
Well, I suggest you're always going to have friction, because you might get agreement at a leadership level. For, say, you use Rotorua as an example, leadership might agree to what's happening, but there'll be people that haven't agreed with that decision, and they will hold their right to protest. So it's never going to be completely frictionless.
That's where relationships come in, and there should be people who can tell you, look, sadly, we did our best, but you're still going to get pushback on this, and that's where
you're always going to get that, no matter what. You might get, a majority of agreement amongst Māori to do something, but you're going to have people that don't agree with the decision, and are going to, keep their.
Of course, so long as we know that. That's forearmed.
I want to shift you to this one here. This is what the return of investment are, and the current state risk these are taken from our audited statements and as well as the health check. And these are some of the ideas. This is the benefit that we get from embedding this in the organisation. I'll let you have a glance at that, but I'll take it as read. And then if I might push on to the next slide. And I really wanted to leave with you. This is how we know we start becoming successful, including the way that we would report back to you. Tuamaka is adopted by the council, which is what is coming up. The way that we would report against the outcomes of Tuamaka, which you will agree to, or the outcomes in your LTP, if that's what you seek. So this is what good starts to look like when we start to have a focused and planned intent.
The slide actually quite excites me because not only is it fewer escalations in litigation, I remember like once when we were talking about, I think it was KPIs, and it was like having no judicial review. It's like, well, how do we make sure that we don't have any environment court cases either? All this stuff costs us money, but it takes away time and attention on the opportunities. And so I just wanted to that last one as well, the co-investment opportunities, like that's where we want to be. We want to totally move from the space of the friction and it's just not productive for anyone, and move into that. Well, what are the opportunities? If you're going to put a brand new hotel down at the lakefront right by a $40 million asset, you know, what are the opportunities there to co-invest to make it better for Rotorua? So I just wanted to emphasize that. I think this aligns quite well with what we have seen and heard as the priorities of councillors too. Thank you.
So on the next slide coming, one of the things that we want to do, as I said, pending your approval and your direction to us, which will be on the next slide, Michelle and the team have already started to identify and have already started. And this is within current budget, so we're not proposing the small budget that Te Amorangi has, and budgets within existing budgets. This is the stuff that we're already starting to do that aligns with Te Tuamaka. We want to do a review of our training. We've got engagement plans and implementation plans across many of the big projects that we're dealing with at the moment. We never get the chance to go back and review. So there's some simple things that we want to do. Actually, Michelle, do you want to speak to these?
Yeah, you've covered most of it, but like, for example, we provide across the board training. So we've got Nogo Marae Te Reo we do engagement, but then we have specific roles in this organisation that are consistently out there engaging, and so specific training developed for them in those spaces. So they don't need so much reliance on us. It'll be just checking it. The relationship mapping is probably the most important. We know as things change around new groups, iwi groups come, or hapu or whānau groups come up, and what I've recognised through our legal advice we received is most of our legislation says things like tangata whenua, iwi, hapu, but it doesn't have a clear interpretation. So how do we ensure through our relationship mapping we attempt and do our best to ensure that we're talking to the right people at the right times, and our staff are aware of those things, so things like judicial review don't come to head, and then obviously engagement guidelines. So just outlining who our iwi are. That map that you have suggested, I'm actually thinking that will go in those guidelines, so everyone that picks it up can go, oh wow, these are all the iwi that or hapu or different iwi groups that have protocols or gifted reserves, or we share like the redwoods, and then the inter-council training. It's a bit of te iwi o toro, isn't it? So when we come along, like we did when you came into council, is all that contextual training about how we work as a council, who the iwi are, what their settlements say, those sort of things. So ensuring that that's a consistent training we do every time. It's there. I'm not sure about the annual review, which is.
Yeah, that's about reflecting. These are just, it's very operational, but we wanted to show with you that by having this guiding document that you would endorse and adopt, that's the trigger that drives down into the organisation, the changes that you're seeking in the outputs, that linkages, what can we see? Because a lot of the changes, a lot of the issues and challenges do sit at an operational level, and that's where we want to put a lot of our time and effort to be different. But there are some roles and responsibilities and expectations on yourselves. And, if you're going to a meeting and you need to refresh your memory, this is the central document you might lean to. Or, how do I approach that? This is what this enables us to do. If I might, if there's no questions, I'll take us through. Sorry.
So this is maybe a bit detailed and a bit into the future, this question, but it comes back to Don's question around relationship mapping and engagement guidelines. Like this is and how you track that. Like I really like the idea of, that's, from the top of an organization to the bottom of an organization, you can track contacts with who you're trying to engage with. Have you given any thought so far to how you actually bring that to life? Because like I said, there's a lot of, in the sports world, like we use Friendly Manager and we use all these sorts of engagement tools to try and track those relationships. So like every time I reach out to the local cricket club, I write into the software that I've spoken to John from the local cricket club about this, and this. So then when you go in and you log in to see what's happened, you can see, oh, actually this relationship exists. Are you looking at building something? Is that where this is? Okay.
Exactly the same, and also actually making it, let's say, color coded, so you can actually pull it up. So this is my view: is pull it up. It's a map, and actually for the executive team, they can see on it where there's red. So that's where there's an issue. So, we're not just hearing about it when it comes up as an issue, rather than we can actually track it as it's happening. So that's sort of the stuff we're looking at in terms of relationship mapping.
Is there someone, I know our situation is different, but is there someone in local government that's actually doing that well, like tracking well?
So when I worked at regional council, we had attempted to create a GIS thing. The biggest issue, and this is part of the work, is actually implementation. People behaviour, them actually opening it and using it and logging things. So that's probably the main part, and how we think about how we do that so it's simple, so it's not like another thing to do. And yeah, that's sort of what we're
So there are organisations that are doing it. There's apps available for yourselves and as well as staff. It's live, it's current. It's about reducing surprises so that when you're going into meetings, etc., you're armed with the same intel at your fingertips. So there's definitely technology.
So is there an actual database of all 35?
Yes, yep. We are statutorily required to maintain a database. Clark was working late last night after 6 p.m. updating our database. We are required to do that under, I think, RMA legislation. So we hold a database, and that's what we use to disseminate whānui from the mayor and yourselves all the time.
It's quite useful because we don't often know that.
I was going to say, so that database is detailed. It says top of the organisation, these people. Then
it's got me. It's actually got the office. It's got the chair and the CEO if they've got one. Or we've got a point of contact as named, and then we've got another line that talks to what are the settlements. We're trying to build this repository, central information, so it's at our fingertips for the likes of our teams that are just working furiously to deliver outcomes. But, yeah.
Just as we're about to wrap up, but just as we are, this is something new, but there has been substantial work happen in the past. Stavros, sorry, I want to put you on the spot. Do you just want to give a brief outline on how, with some of our significant infrastructure projects, like we have some staff in your team, right, that specifically have worked on that as well, just to make sure that we're all understanding of what is already existing? I want to respect that there is already quite a lot of work that does happen. This is just seeking to improve it.
Can I distinguish, in my opinion, two very distinct things as an operator have to do? I can't, as a council representative, distinguish who receives water supplies or sewage supplies. I think those services are universally needed by everyone. In order to do that, we need to collaborate with a lot of people, especially in Rotorua, who have a historical background, which says the collaboration with different iwi and hapu differs depending on the land ownership or the history of the place. So if you take water supply from the northern district, Nongotaha, and Hamurana and all those areas, we know that the dominant hapu iwi there is Ngātarangi Waewae, and we don't understand the history. So therefore, before we do something, we will approach a local iwi, Ngātarangi Waewae, and say, well, this is what we trying to do. We need to provide water to 10,000 people. We want to use water from that source. You are the landowner, behind that, the historical agreement. How can we collaborate with that? And we build what we call the collaboration agreement, or relationship agreement that guides our actions. Like any relationship, is give and take. I think there's always, a goodwill give. There's always, well, if I want to give that, what are you going to give me back? How can I benefit from that? So that's the relationship. Karamutakina is the same thing. Again, we've got a significant element of our services that are located on gifted reserves, and I'm not an expert in how the gifted reserves arrived at. I've read the Fenton Agreement. I find it difficult to navigate sometimes because I think behind it is a lot of intentions rather than specifics. But the core intention is actually to collaborate on the use of gifted reserves for public benefit. How you define public benefit, you have to sit down with someone and talk about it and say, well, I think a public benefit is X, Y, Z. What do you think? So you'll arrive at a common denominator behind it. At the same time, I don't want to hide the fact that it's quite easy to talk about a group as a group identity, but there are individuals with a group that are easier to work than other individuals. There's no debate about it. There's no question about it. So the first port of call is what needs to be done? Who's going to benefit from that? How can we share that benefit? How can we collaborate on the common objectives behind that? And hopefully you can get to the point where you share the common benefits and then makes the road easier for that. So I hope that's succinctly, explained. But yeah, I think Paul just said earlier, I think we need to step away from definitions and dogmas and things like that. We live in Rotorua. Rotorua has got some unique characteristics. Well, we need to, the same way you walk out on the road and you need to be careful of traffic, you need to be aware of what's around you and navigate accordingly to that respect. And from time to time, you will have disagreements, you have to resolve them. And so that's how I see it.
Thank you very much, Deborah. That's really helpful. So let's wrap up. We have been presented the Tuamaka strategy. So it's really just a question that will bring this to council, and then we can have proper, if you want, debate on it. Hopefully not. And then bring it to council for adoption.
Question. Was the January workshop
correct me if I'm wrong, the health check one?
I think there were some elements of it just because it hadn't been to the...
I think you're correct. I think the mayor is absolutely correct. There was parts of that disclosure from Glenn Hawkins and from Parihaui Kirsten that spoke specifically about certain people that had been interviewed, and they had been, whilst they were fine to be to give that feedback, when you got into the conversation, they didn't wish to be identified because they were on this. But can I come back to you on that? We can talk with governance about whether it was recorded or that. Are you talking about the health check 18 for this?
Yes. And then is this one?
Today's recorded, as far as I understand. So we'll go up on YouTube.
So when I did the search for the workshop documents online, it's not showing.
Yeah, we generally do, sorry if I could. We generally do them post me.
The first one's not.
Yeah, that one was closed.
This is why I explained.
So today's not.
Today's
This will be published. These will be.
Those documents that are uploaded in Stella.
The only reason I say that is we're supposed to be community along with us on this discussion, and there are certain elements who will take confidentiality as not a good thing. So let's avoid that. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously in the council meeting, it's likely to, the media's there as well. So we'll see what comes from that. Okay, and then also just FYI, this, depending how it goes for the adoption at council, in about September, we anticipate that that's when many of the various proposals will come to our council to start considering for the LTP. So this, whether or not we consider supporting a 10-year business plan, so you've got your first immediate actions that are noted as within the current budget of this financial year. And then whether or not we wish to do the long term as part of the long term plan will come to us in September. So that will be another separate discussion. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Kumiko, and also please thank Susan for your assistance with this discussion. It's been very valuable, and thank you very much, Paul and Michelle. So I might wrap us up the karakia by
So we'll agree with the karakia that we use to meet meetings. So ke whakairea ki te tanu, ke wātea ai te ara, ke tūru ki whakataha ai, ke tūru ki whakataha ai. Huye.
Ai.